So when you're talking about Camaros, the ultimate Camaros would be Copos, Yenkos, ZL1s. But really, the ultimate one-of-one Camaro is this LS7 Baldwin Motion car. It's in Marty Shore's book. It had a special history, super low mileage, factory yellow car, not all decked out like most Baldwin Motion cars. Gary got to take this for a drive the other day, and he fell in love with the car. After he did a nice little burnout in the thing and realized how hard this car pulled, he said this is one of the coolest Camaros he's ever seen. So let's go back, revisit that restoration. I may look a little younger, but it's a really cool process. We did it over 13 episodes, and it's something that'll be real interesting to viewers that are restoring special Camaros.
Every car guy worth his salt likes to turn a wrench or two in his own collectible car. Some of us even put the old goon tune on the motor for a Saturday night. Some of us have even attempted full restorations of their own cars. There's some cars, though, that really no mortal man should touch, like this beautiful 427 Corvette, or maybe this Ferrari. A Dream Car Garage, when we come across a project like that, only goes to one guy. That's Peter Klutt, legendary Motorcar. Good to see you again. So amid all of these cars, there's so many restorations and a whole lot of stories, but you got kind of a different story for this season.
Yeah, we met a fella at a racetrack, and it was just a real cool car that he wanted to restore. It was a Baldwin Motion car, and it got better as we went along. He sent me all the paperwork, and it was all there. And he says, by the way, it's only got 1,700 miles on this thing. Man. And it's a yellow car, and it's a stage 3 car, and we're thinking, wow, we got to put this thing on TV.
So it's a little bit of both worlds. It's kind of a standard car, not too much different from this one, but with a long history.
Absolutely. And he's out back. Let's go meet him.
You're kidding. Oh, no, let's do that.
Tom, I think you know John Catoni.
Sure do. Good to see you guys. We all met at the racetrack. And remember, guys, this isn't the racetrack. We have to tell the truth here.
Yeah, sure.
Well, to a certain degree. Everybody can remember the first time they saw a big block Camaro roll down the street. You know, I never had any aspiration to own one. I just wanted to be able to see him go by, read the car and driver and the road and track. So this big block Camaro would have impressed me in 1969, but this is even more impressive than you might think. Tell us about this very special car.
This is a Baldwin Motion Camaro. In place of the normal 396 big block motor, this car is equipped with an LS7 454.
That's almost immoral, isn't it? But right from the factory, this car was delivered and then modified by Motion.
That's correct.
All right, so now the whole idea about authenticating a car like this, you know, you are so well equipped here. How did you actually come across this car?
I've known the car since new. The original owner is a friend from my hometown. And so when I had the chance to purchase the car, I went back to him and asked him if he had any of the old paperwork on the car.
Well, sure
did.
Enough. Retail order form that somebody named Mr. Bean wrote up, and then the detailed invoice here. Peter, authentication isn't always this easy.
Oh, no. When John and I first talked, he told me an LS7 Camaro. And I thought,
what did you say?
Right. But I didn't say that. And I said, well, send me the paperwork. And the next day over the fax comes this paperwork, and it's, wow, everything's there. I mean, it was perfect.
Yeah. So now the Baldwin Auto Company took delivery of this vehicle and then sent it over to Motion, and they equipped the car. What are the Motion parts basically?
In addition to the engine, there's a different rear end in the car. There's a high-performance scatter shield and clutch assembly. They do traction bars in the car, basically setting the car up as a bracket race, drag race type car.
So then it becomes a question of acquisition, and you know, all the money in the world, it may not be enough, depending. I guess it comes down to what the buyer will take. But a strategy to go in and buy something like this, surely there's got to be some research that you can do. What did you do to get prepared to offer on this car?
Basically, I wanted to make sure that I knew what the car was and what its status was before I went to buy the car. I talked to Joel Rosen, Mr. Motion, to confirm that this was one of his cars in addition to the paperwork, and also to find out how many LS7 454 cars he built.
How many?
He says 1 or 2.
All right, so the sourcing, the authentication, the acquisition's over with. You're now going to take this thing and make it a brand new 1969 Camaro.
Right, we're going to strip it down, right down to a bare chassis. We're going to get it soda and sandblasted. It's going to be basically bare metal, and we're going to build it from the ground up. We're going to go through and prime it. We're going to have the motor rebuilt. We're going to have the tranny rebuilt. We're going to redo all the brakes. We're going
going to go through everything. It's going to be a brand new car.
We're going to be with you every step of the way on Dream Car Garage. Well, do you feel confident? Can we shake down this? You're going to sign the car over to us? I think you found one of the best in the business to do the job. When we come back, we've got some more of the best in the business to answer your questions. Welcome back to Dream Car Garage. Peter Klutt from Legendary Motorcar. Well, we're going to start work today on this Baldwin Motion Camaro. You know, John, he wants this car to be a fully restored Conqueror-style car, and he's got some ideas that he wants to do later, but he really wants you to get started as a pro shop to do this thing from soup to nuts. I dare say there's a lot of us out there who've started working a project like this, and you know, the first thing to do is take it apart, but not really at the same level that you do at Legendary Motorcar.
Well, we don't want to just take it apart. When we get started, we want to see exactly what's original, what isn't, and decide what we're going to save. And with a car with super low mileage like this thing, there's a lot of great parts that we don't really have to replace.
Yeah, and I guess aesthetically, probably more desirable to keep a part that was on the car rather than to replace it just for the sake of replacing it.
Sure, and a lot of parts have date codes and casting numbers and all that sort of stuff, and you want to keep all that stuff.
Yeah, well, why don't you say we start with the engine and the fact that, well, there really isn't one. Now, one of the things that people talk about is matching the engine to the chassis. That, on a car like this, which was delivered as a race car, may not be as important as it is to a conventional restoration.
It's not, and quite frankly, these cars were, again, sent off to Motion, and they stuck in a motor, and the one that actually matched the car, the 396, was pulled out.
Yeah, that's right. So and I guess the dealer kept that for as part of the compensation.
Well, I think actually Joel Rosen got to keep those motors. That's where he made his money.
Pretty good business. Huh? All right, so the fact that that's gone, you're going to be building up a brand new engine for this car as you get through the restoration. But as you look into the engine compartment, do you see any particular problems, opportunities in here?
Well, I mean, it's an original engine bay. There's no rust, there's no damage, which is great. Some of the wiring looks like it's been played around with, so we're going to have to go through the wiring, see if it's savable, and if it isn't, we'll buy a new harness. Stuff like the booster and the master cylinder and all that sort of stuff, they're all going to get replaced, or refinished. Classic Tube's going to take care of all that stuff for us. Things like the hinges and that sort of stuff, they're all in great shape. I mean, we're just going to rephosphate those sort of things.
Now, when we're all done, it'll have the original markings from the inspections in the factory and that sort of thing. But essentially what you're looking for at this stage is to see, what do I need to keep, what do I need to replace? Right. You don't really need to replace much in here.
No, we're going to even things like the A-arms. There's no rust on the A-arms. We have to do all the bushings and the ball joints and all that sort of stuff. But we're going to make sure that we've kept as much of the original car as possible.
Well, I think John will think that's cool.
Yeah.
All right, now what about body panels like we see up here? Evidently this thing was flat-toed because the nose of this thing is kind of beat up. Are you going to try to restore that, or is it available on the market? Can I go buy something like that?
Yeah, if we can get this, because it is in the front of the car here and it's taken a couple good shots. And Keith could fix this, but sometimes it's cheaper to go out and buy an NOS piece, and it might still be available from GM. If we can get it right from GM, well, then we just order a new panel.
And cheaper way to go, plus less fussy. Well, Peter, I've been to enough cruise nights to know that a T3 headlight's a good thing, original equipment, right?
Absolutely, but we only have one. This one is an original one.
Uh-oh. So the next step, you know what, we don't even know that this one works, actually.
No, so we're going to get two of them.
Okay, now where are you going to get those?
Well, we might even have two of these upstairs.
Oh, well, that's good, too. So, you know, when you're getting down to a full restoration, something like that, detail very important.
Absolutely. Headlights is one of the first things a judge will look at. We got really lucky with this interior, Tom. I mean, the thing is like brand new.
Yeah, it looks restored, actually, but it is as delivered from the dealership.
Right. We're going to be real careful removing this interior, give it a really good cleaning, and that's all it needs. I mean, the 1,700 miles on the odometer is believable when you see the interior.
Yeah, normally you get a lot of wear and tear in the kick panels of these door panels. These look really
They're
great
like
shape.
brand new. They've got all the original screws. Even things like the weather strips here, they're the original weather strips. They have a rolled bead where the reproduction ones now are flat. So we're going to even try and save the weather strips.
Wow. All right. Well, it's pretty easy to buy something like that, but I see now value in having the original pieces.
Stuff. Some of the stuff that we're going to have to pay some attention to is the dash, real typical, they roll. Things like the gauges, the chrome around the gauges are worn slightly, and that's just from being out in the sun or, you know, not stored properly. Obviously, the floor there, we got a gaping hole in there.
You got to believe that somebody tried that at a racetrack. They found a new transmission.
Half-hour job.
Yeah, well, how long is it going to take to fix it, though? I mean, and will we be able to tell that it was a problem? In other words, how long are you going to spend on something like that?
That, my guy, will spend probably a day doing that. We'll buy a training tunnel out of a rust-free California car, and we'll butt weld it all in, and you'll never be able to tell it was done.
Okay, so molded carpet takes care of that anyway. So, you know, a bonus is that you don't have to spend a whole lot of time in here because, well, even the headliner.
Yeah, actually the headliner, we're going to actually try and save that because the patterning is slightly different on the reproduction ones. Things like the seat belts, you know, the date codes on them are all legible. I mean, this seat belt's probably never been out of the holder here.
That's great.
Things we found in the back seat, the original aerial, and they're different. The reproduction aerials are round, where this one's kind of like a flattened out tube.
So at first glance, you're not going to spend too much time, not as much as you've spent on other cars that we've seen you work on, but how long is Legendary Motorcar going to work on this to get this disassembled to your satisfaction?
By the time we're ready to take it to the sandblaster, which will be sort of the next step, we'll have a couple guys spending 3 days. Everything will be labeled and bagged and put away. We'll document everything, and then we'll have you know, a bunch of photos to go back to and just see how it was.
Well, hi there, welcome back to Dream Car Garage. Today is metal replacement day on our Baldwin Motion Camaro. You know, there are a lot of body men out there who can actually fix a car, but a craftsman is what it takes to actually add value to a classic car like this one. That's why all our Pro Shop segments are over at Legendary Motorcar Company. This is Peter Klutt. What a plug, eh?
Good to see you, Tom. Always good.
Yeah, but the metal replacement sounds like a scary process to me. You're really making something out of something that was not there before. Sounds complicated.
Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. What we found when we sandblasted the car last week, we found a couple of pinholes here and here, but we found some real heavy pitting all the way down. So what we decided to do is replace the whole rail here, and we made up a piece here. Now it looks fairly simple, but it's actually 2 pieces, and it has a couple of curves in there, and you've got to stretch and shrink a couple areas. And it just fits in there, and it actually encompasses part of the quarter panel because it got a little bit weak around here.
Now, you use the term stretch and shrink like, you know, like they're an everyday occurrence, but that's a real foreign concept to some of us who don't work with metal every day. How do you actually go about the process of stretching and shrinking a piece?
Various tools and equipment will do that for you.
Now, you're doing this yourself around Legendary Motorcar.
Well, not really. We've got a master craftsman that knows exactly what he's doing with metal. Tom, I think you know Keith Sim, our panel beater.
Keith, good to see you again.
Good to see you again.
He really is the legend behind Legendary Motorcar. I know the matter, but
He absolutely is. But Keith, you're starting to form this. Why don't you tell us what you're doing here?
This piece is for the bottom of the right side quarter panel. We've already made the piece for the left side, and we're now starting on the right side. So this has to actually conform to the quarter panel. We try to fit the panel as closely as possible before we start welding. That way we know we're going to have a good product when it's finished. I've already made a piece for the left side.
Now, I know what you've done here, Keith, but why don't you tell everybody else what it took to do this?
Well, we try to raise the panel here. This is actually a raising machine. It's better known as an English wheel. But we use it to raise the panel up in here and form a compound curve. And then we break the 2 edges for the underside of the quarter panel on our sheet metal brake and form the piece around the end of the quarter panel. And again, it's like I said before, it's the better the panel fits before you start welding, the better the job is going to be in the end.
But you know, Keith, you guys are almost laissez-faire about this sort of stuff. I mean, it's what you do, but for a layman like me, I mean, I've welded a lot of panels on race cars. They didn't have to look that good. How long does something like this take?
This panel took a couple hours to make.
So 2 hours.
Yeah.
And that obviously you've got to know what you're doing as well as how to do it. So.
Why don't you show us how to put this panel in now, Keith?
Okay.
Well, Keith Peters, where he usually is when you start to work, somewhere far away. So I'll go through this process with you. Now you've got something you spent a couple hours building, but this is really where the hard work starts.
Yeah, we've got a rust problem in the bottom of the quarter panel here. We try not to take too much of the original quarter panel away because we're trying to save all the original spot welds around the outside and the inner panel as well. So we only replace what we absolutely have to. And to do it properly, it should be butt welded into place. Lap welding tends to rust between the overlap joint and it pushes the panel off again. That's why we use the TIG welder and we butt weld the panel into place.
Well, that takes a lot more time than a lap weld, but then of course you get the better product at the end.
That's right. It's a little more time consuming, but the finished product is well worth it.
So this is basically going to fit right up here, huh?
This panel fits into place here.
Oh, it's nice.
The better the panel fits.
It's almost like it was made for that, Keith.
That's right. The better the panel fits before you start welding, the better the finished product is going to be.
Sure. All right, what stage are we at right now with it then?
Right now we have fit the panel into place. It's just about ready to weld in. So now we're going to take a scribe and we scribe a line across. We'll start at one end and try and only scribe the line once. If you scribe it more than once, sometimes you end up with a double line. You don't know which line to follow. So we'll try and scribe the line just once, and then we'll take the panel off.
Okay.
And now we'll use an air-powered cutoff wheel. Well, Tom, I'm just about ready to start welding here if you want to pull off a helmet and sit down.
When we come back, we're going to be at our set, and we're going to be talking about more metal replacement and more welding techniques. But right now, we're going to finish this job up. Welcome back to Dream Car Garage. Our Motion Camaro is coming along really well. Keith spent a lot of time repairing all the metalwork that needed to be done in this car. Kind of obsessive if you ask me. But the owner of the car gave Peter Klutt and his guys instructions to give him a concours-style paint job. So I thought you'd probably add 50 or 60 more hours to that, but it's a heck of a lot more, isn't it?
It is. You can spend 100 to 200 hours just in prep before you paint it.
Man, oh man. Well, take me through the process. This hood was pretty good when you got it.
The hood was really good, but to make it perfectly straight, you have to go through a bunch of different stages. So right now we've got some polysurfacer on there, and that's about 4 mils per coat, and you can put on 2 coats. Sometimes you can squeeze on 3 coats.
Now that's standard operating procedure for a body shop?
No, not exactly.
No. Okay.
Most body shop, right the primer and paint it.
All right, now polysurfacer is for what?
Just to make sure the finish is perfectly straight. Okay. So what we start off with is we've got polysurfacer. Most of this has been sanded, and in this corner here hasn't. We've got a guide coat. So we'll take a 120 grit paper and keep filing this off, and you'll see the guide coat disappearing, right? And once you've got the guide coat entirely gone, then you know you're ready for the next step, okay? And you want to make sure that there's no guide coat left anywhere. Now as we're going through this, you can see it disappearing, okay? And what you can see is in this corner is still a low spot. You're through here, you're down to the polysurfacer here and here, so we know we've got to work this a little bit more.
Hence the guide code. Now I don't have to ask.
So we just keep working it a little bit more.
Now in terms of thickness, we're talking about removing 1/1000th, 2/1000ths of an inch.
Well, what you want to do is take this right down so you have maybe, you know, ideally 2 mils of polysurfacer, and then you're ready for the next step. Okay, now you can see the guide coat is gone.
Yeah, it definitely is straight and flat, but what went on in this area here? You seem to be right down to metal.
We're actually not at that stage yet. What we want to do is we're using 120 there. So what we want to do now is apply another guide coat, and it's just any sort of paint. So this stuff dries instantly.
Don't worry about getting it on my hands. It's going to be all right.
So then the next step is we take a 240 grit paper on a board file again. You can't use a machine. The second you use a machine on this thing, it's not straight anymore.
No kidding.
Yeah. So what we'll do is do the exact same step again with a finer sandpaper. Okay? And now you can also see the coarser scratches still show up. So this also shows us if we've got some deep scratches. So we keep working this until this is totally gone. And what we're doing here is we're showing a really straight area. It doesn't usually go this quick.
Yeah. Well, it's you, Peter.
Yeah.
We're compensating. You spend too much time on the phone in the office, but actually, I'm impressed.
So there you go. You've got a couple of little scratches that we're just going to remove, and then you're ready for final primer.
Well, now that's starting to feel a lot more like what you've got up here.
Right.
But now tell me about what these things are.
Well, what's happened here is they've kept taking it down, and you know that you've got a slightly low spot here because you're down to the bare metal here and here. So what we do is we do this whole polysurfacer step one more time.
And hence the idea of the build primer.
Right, and what you want is the entire thing to be in this white polysurfacer, and then you know it's perfectly straight. You haven't broke through anywhere. Then what you do is prime it, and the guys have just primed a bunch of stuff in the booth, and that stuff was all finished 100%, and it's now in final primer.
We're not even at the paint yet. All right, so that's fine for a nice big flat hood, but these are pretty complicated surfaces here. Same process?
Same thing. You're taking a block, and then what we do is we go to an aluminum block for the final wet sand. And it's just a machine piece of aluminum, and it's perfectly flat.
You know, I've seen guys in your shop spending literally a whole day on the wet sanding process on a single panel. Why is that process so critical to the final paint job?
That's the last thing that you put on before the top coat. And with wet sanding, we've cheated a little bit here. We've already taken this down with 400 paper, and we're down to 600 paper, right? And you just wet sand.
Now, what role does the water play in this whole thing?
The water actually lubricates and carries away the material that you're sanding.
I see, all right.
Right? Now, when you get to a certain stage, what you want to do is dry this off again.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, it certainly made a difference in terms of the color
And the feel.
and the feel is better too.
Okay.
Well, Peter, give me a number. I mean, I'm not paying the bills, but I mean, the owner of the car is going to want to know. 200, 300 more hours?
Well, you could spend on this stage, before it's ready for paint, anywhere from 100 to 300 hours, depending how nuts you want to go.
Well, he's going to get a pro paint job, and that's why I came to Peter Klutt, Legendary Motorcar, in the first place. When we come back, we'll be back in the studio talking more about this process. Welcome back to Dream Car Garage. We're here again with Peter Klutt from Legendary Motorcar. The Motion Camaro is ready for paint, but there's more structural things to do before we actually get that far. You identified this early in the going as something that you wanted to clean up, and frankly, I didn't understand it. What's the deal here?
When we got it back from the sandblaster, it really wasn't in bad shape, but there was a big dent right in the cross member here, and somebody was jacking up the car. I mean, it was a race car.
Oh, sure. So on and off the jack, and we've seen that many times. So you've decided to go after this, and obviously you've already done some work here. What have you done?
Well, what we've done is we've cut off the section along here, drilled out all the spot welds, and taken the whole piece out. And then you can see where Keith has already metal finished the back of this. He's using a hammer and dolly. Now we've got the shape of it right again instead of this big dent. Now there's sort of two ways of fixing this. This is the right way, and what a lot of shops will do, instead of cutting this out, going to this extent, they'll just use a coat of body filler.
Oh.
But the problem there is you got a great big half-inch, looks like a half-inch steel plate.
Not to mention the next time you put a jack on it, it's not going to work out so well. So now that you're at this stage, it really looks a lot better than the actual work done by the factory.
Right. Some of the factory welds, and we're going to leave all this. You don't want to improve on the factory welds. I mean, they were just put together as a production car, and they didn't really care if the welds were neat or messy, and they're not the greatest welds, but we want to make this thing concourse, the way it left the factory.
Well, speaking of welding, now what's next for Keith?
What we'll do is we'll plug weld this back down to this section here, and then this will be tigged along here, ground, and you won't be able to see this thing's ever come off of here.
And then, of course, the whole thing will be prepped for paint and be ready to be assembled when the car goes back together.
Right. We'll paint it the black, and it's sort of a semi-gloss black. We'll finish all the welds off, metal finish all these little areas here, again, where the jack has slipped off or you know, there's been some sort of damage, and it'll be like brand new.
Now, let's suppose that this was in tougher shape because it was in a crash or something like that. Would you buy one of these brand new, or would you fabricate your way out of that?
If it's really rough, yeah, I mean, there's tons of these things sitting in the wrecking yard down in California. You can get something that was, you know, that was damaged, maybe hit in the back, and it's got a really good front clip, and that's probably the way to go.
All right, so How many more hours before we get to get this thing to the paint?
Well, that's going to be the next step. It's going to get prepped. This is all going to get finished. The whole thing's going to be scuffed, and then it's going to go in the paint booth. It's going to get hung up. It's going to get sprayed, and then it's ready to go under the car.
It always seems to be more hours than meets the eye.
There is. There's a ton of hours in this stuff.
Peter Klutt from legendary Motorcar. Welcome back to Dream Car Garage here at the Pro Shop with Peter Klutt. Well, this isn't your shop. This is the BASF Training Center, and an opportunity to go through the process of painting the Baldwin Motion car. Now, to me, a paint job is a paint job, and there's good ones and bad ones, but I've never fails to amaze me how thorough you guys are at doing your show cars.
Right. What happens is for starters, we paint the car entirely apart, where most shops, they paint it all together.
Sure.
So you're in the booth 2 or 3 times just in painting the body. Then you also have the undercarriage to paint in detail. You have the trunk to do. You have the factory undercoating to do. So we're in the booth probably 5 times as opposed to once.
All right, so, and the result is obvious. I mean, some of your stuff has been remarkable, but some of the technology that's come along and painting has come a long way, like these new downdraft booths.
Sure, and the booths are really important, but what's most important, what people don't realize, is 90% of the dirt that comes in a paint job is actually either from the painter or from the car itself. So the booth is really only 10% of the deal, especially when you're wet sanding and buffing.
Well, so what do you do about that? I mean, if the booth can't really save you from all that dust from the car, and this is an old car.
Right. One of the things we like to do is meticulously vacuum out the car, you know, blow off the car, tack rag the car, and then we do something a little bit different. We spray all the areas that really aren't going to get a lot of paint, like the floor pans underneath the quarter panels, all that sort of stuff, and that helps hold down. If there's a loose piece of dirt in the floor pan, it's not going to blow around later and ruin your paint job.
That's a great idea, and also the detail finish. I mean, when you pull back a carpet, it's nice to see paint.
Sure.
Sure. Now, what about getting back to the original condition that the car was delivered in? Okay, now that the car is painted, there's still the firewall and the undercarriage you have to deal with.
Right, and at that stage, what we do is we'll take the car back to our shop. We mask off the entire body now that is finished painted, and at that point, we have to do all the primer, the overspray, the factory undercoating, and the black in the engine bay. So another step again.
Wow, more and more steps, and now we're at 6 or 7. All right, now products, they've come a long way too, with all kinds of different paint, and here at BASF, they've got their own kind of system.
Right, and we like to use a base clear product. It's great, especially for climates that have big changes. You know, it lasts longer. You can sand and buff it. It's great against acid rain. I mean, the technology today is just awesome compared to 10 years ago even.
Yeah, well, all right, let's go back right to 1969. What kind of a paint job would that have been done at the factory?
I mean, nowhere near. There was no such thing as downdraft booths and that sort of stuff. They had orange peel in it. They had dirt in it. Quite frankly, if we did a paint job like GM did back in '69, John would have our head.
Keep the cards and letters to yourself, please. We don't want to hear from GM, but okay, so take us through the process. So base clear, obviously, you put on the yellow and then you put a clear coat on top.
Right, and what we start with the pre-cleanol, with just a rag and the pre-cleanol, and that takes off any of the little loose particles on top of it. At the same time, you're using a blower to blow off any of the stuff. After that's all done, you tack rag it down, and again, if you've got anything sitting on top, this is almost like a little sticky rag. It'll pick up those fine particles.
Okay.
All right. Then we go to the base, which is actually the color. And in this case, it's the yellow. You mix that with some thinner, and then you go to the clear. Now, this is a really high build clear, so we only need 3 coats. Quite often, we'll do more than that, depending on how many mils the clear is going to build, because we want to cut it down again, sand it, and buff it.
All right, the color itself, then, you're going with the original color that the car was delivered with, or as close to you get?
Yeah, it's exact.
All right, now how do you actually achieve the exact color?
What we'll do is they have a computer here that'll match the original paint, and since this car was original paint, we're able to give them a small chip. They match it, and it's perfect, and it's in base clear. Now we've got a formula for Daytona Yellow.
All right, your client's going to be happy with that. So 6 or 7 stages in the process, and that's before we even get to assembly. Yeah. I'll tell you what, it's not as easy to paint a car these days, especially when you're trying to come up with a show quality car like legendary Motorcar does every time.
Welcome back to Dream Car Garage. Today we're talking about suspension, and we're not talking about how to install the suspension or what components we need to put on, but we're talking about details. And I've got Jim Coleman, my head mechanic and detailer, to help us through this whole process. Jim, we've got a steering box here that's pretty much detailed. What did you do to make this right again?
Okay, what we've done is we've stripped the box, degreased it, looked for paint marks or any identification marks. We've taken photographs and made drawings, and then what we've done is we've built the box up the way it came from the factory with the original paint marks.
Okay, now this box would have been a natural finish, correct?
Yes.
Okay, it would have had black phosphate bolts.
Yes.
And this piece here would have been natural as
aluminum,
well,
yes.
right? Now, once we've got it all buffed and polished so it looks like an original piece, how do we protect the natural finish?
Okay, usually we just wipe a smearing of grease on, let it sit overnight, and then wipe it off and just leave a fine film on.
And that'll help protect it. Okay, now there's a couple markings that still need to go on this one. What do we have to do here?
There's a yellow sticker that's supposed to go up on the top, and then a yellow paint mark that goes in the bottom. Still, it hasn't gone on.
Jim, we've got a spindle here that's pretty much finished, restored. Now again, same sort of process?
Yeah, degrease it, look for the paint marks, identify the marks, and then blast it.
Okay, and then how do we get that black finish again?
Okay, we acid dip the part.
All right,
And that'll bring back the original casting finish.
all right, and then we use the grease again?
Yes.
To protect it when it's all done?
Yes.
Okay, now this looks like it's off my old Corvette.
It is.
What are we showing here?
This is a new part, but even in the box, new parts will rust.
So we
this
really
would have
need
to
the
be
grease.
refinished again if we wanted to put it back to original
Okay.
or new.
So the grease is real important,
Yes.
so it doesn't start rusting right away. Now we've got a ball joint here. Now, unlike most of these markings, this is actually an index mark, isn't it?
Yes.
And what's it tell us?
Basically, it tells you where to put the part into the control arm. It will actually face to the rear of the control arm.
Okay, so that's an index mark just
Yes.
to show how it lines up.
positions.
Okay, we got a control arm here, a lower control arm, and most of this is black. It's probably about 30% gloss black.
Yes.
Now, why is the top here finished like this?
At the factory, that particular part was dipped in a bucket, and this is the area that was not dipped.
Right.
It was left natural metal on top.
Right, and this would probably vary depending on who's dipping it. One day the whole control arm would be black, the next day maybe only half the control arm would be black. And what we try and do here is refer back to Jim's notes and duplicate exactly the way it was on this car. Now for a lot of these components, for any of the paint marks we're using
Yeah, the model paint.
just regular model paint. Okay, we've got a couple other pieces down here. Okay, and we've got this one here that has to be sent out to the CAD
Yes.
finisher. And what have you done with this?
That one's just been blasted and cleaned up.
Okay, we've got all the original part numbers on this, so we want to use
Yes.
this as opposed to a new piece.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, and this one?
That one's off of a Corvette, but that's the proper finish. That's the silver CAD.
Okay, so that's what this will look like
Yes.
when it's finished.
Yep.
All right. As you can see, it's real important to get all the right markings back. Document everything when you take it apart. That way it's nice and easy once you've got the pieces finished, and put that coat of grease on it. It'll protect the bare metal. It won't start rusting. Welcome back to Dream Car Garage. I'm Peter Klutt, and we've got Gary Nolan here from Diamond Trim, who does all of our upholstery work. Now we're working on the Baldwin Motion car, and we've got a brand new headliner coming in, but first we got to take the bows out of the original headliner. Any tips, Gary?
Absolutely. Very important. These bows are all similarly arced and similar in length. Very important. Number them front to back so they don't get mixed up, because if you mix up one, it's going to add
That's when the top looks kind of
very
funny.
distorted. Yes.
Okay, so we'll number these things right now. Now, one of the other things we got to do is we've also got to make sure that they slide in at the correct location. Now, can we cut that after the fact?
We cut it while it's in the car.
Okay.
Yeah.
So why don't we pull these ones out?
Okay.
Okay, now that we've got the rods out, we can actually compare the two materials. Now this is the original upholstery, and this was a low mileage car, so the grain is actually real clear and nice. Now National Parts Depot supplied us with the complete headliner, including the sail panel pieces, so let's just compare the material. What do you think?
It's very, very good reproduction. It's a ribbed, textured headliner.
Right.
And it matches identical.
Yeah.
So you're not going to have any problems with sun visors if you don't want to go all the way and change all the sun visors and everything.
Actually,
Everything will
I'm
pick up
surprised.
nicely.
It is an excellent reproduction.
Yeah, it's correct grain, correct stamping. Perfect.
Okay, well let's get the headliner. We'll put the rods back into that one, and then we'll install it.
Let's go.
Okay, Gary, if we start sliding the rod in, is there anything we got to be careful of?
Just carefully that you don't rip it. It can get hung up in certain spots.
Right, and
Or
then
if-
just help it through a bit.
Yeah, if the flyer was sewn correctly, it should not be a problem.
One sec. Okay. Okay. Now that we got this thing in, how did you know which one was front or back on this one?
Peter, for this one, there was nothing marked on it front or back, and it's pretty square. We used the old one for reference.
Okay.
We just put it on the old headliner. It was a
Perfect.
good pattern.
All right, let's slide the rest of them in.
Okay. This next
Now
one,
this one isn't actually go into a hole, does it?
No,
What's this one for then?
it gets gripped. It's got little grips on it. So we're gonna have to pull on it a little bit forward.
Okay.
It's locking in.
Yeah.
Then we'll need a
All right. Okay.
Okay.
We go to the next one. Now we're going to cut that hole for this one later,
Yeah,
correct?
we're gonna cut that light later.
Okay. There we go. That one's coming back good. Okay, now what we've got is we've got the center rod actually in, and for this headliner, we're probably better off to put that rod in and work both ways. Is that
Exactly.
correct?
We've located the center.
Okay.
We're ready to go.
Okay, let's do the front.
Okay.
Now, according to Jimmy's notes, there's 3 holes here, and the holes that he's marked is the top hole. So we do that on both sides. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. Be
right.
consistent with all these holes.
Okay.
Give it a little tug there.
Okay. All right. Okay. Stubborn.
Now these are in floaters too, so.
Okay. And that just holds the center rib
Yep.
from moving. Okay.
Exactly.
Can we go to the next one?
Yep.
All right. And again, Jimmy's got the holes marked here, and it's the top hole. So make sure when you're doing one of these headliners that you put it in the right hole again, or it's not going to fit properly. And make sure that both sides are in the same hole location. All right. We got a center one again.
Yep. Just use.
Okay. Now the front of this, what do we do with this here?
Just going to be a lot of finessing and massaging and pulling and stretching.
Okay. And we'll have to glue this a little bit later, right?
This will eventually be glued last.
Okay.
And then we'll just tuck it up there.
All right. Good. Well, let's go to the back and finish that off.
Okay.
Okay, we've got the back half of the carpet fitted in. Now this is just a test run to see how it fits. Okay, let's try this front piece. National Parts was good enough to give us this carpet, and it's a molded carpet, and it actually fits really nice. You know, we were kind of concerned. The original carpet obviously had a big hole in it from where they had put the shifter in, and we repaired that area, and it fits real slick.
Perfect.
Okay, now before we actually finish and put down the carpet with all the moldings and stuff, we got to put in the firewall pad.
Firewall insulator.
All right, so
Yep.
this fits nice. Let's pull this out.
Okay.
Let's put in the firewall pad. Okay, now what you can see with the pad here, again, National Parts gave us a pad, and it's sort of a generic pad, and depending on what model car and what options you have, you make these holes and you punch them out. So we're gonna have to test fit it again, see which holes we need, put it up into place, punch out all the holes, and then put it in permanently. So let's try that. Let's do a
Yep.
test fit.
And then we can finalize the carpet.
Perfect. All right, Gary, the interior is looking great. You got the carpet sitting in there just nice, but the rest of the interior is actually an unrestored 1,600-mile interior, and it's perfect, probably because it was a race car. Now what we're going to do is we're going to keep the original door panels, we're going to keep the original seats, we're going to keep as much of the original parts as possible.
Welcome back to Dream Car Garage, starting as usual in our Pro Shop segment. That means Peter Klutt, legendary Motorcar. I've been traveling, haven't seen you in a while.
You have, but I think the real reason is the director's choice today. You would have had a tough squeeze in there.
Hey, but real race cars. I remember I started racing when the drivers were fat and the tires were skinny. So you're still trying to do it. All right, you've been working on the Baldwin Motion car. You've got a lot done.
Right. The rear end's in. The leafs are hung. National Parts Depot gave us all the leaf springs. We've got the gas tank in. Again, a National Parts Depot piece. We're starting to detail the motor. It's starting to go together.
All right, let's talk about a concours restoration for a motor. Ostensibly, it starts with a complete rebuild of the motor
Correct.
itself.
If you're doing a real concours car, everything gets done. It's not just cosmetic. The motor gets rebuilt. The tranny gets rebuilt. New clutch, new everything. I mean,
But, you know, the concours judge doesn't see that. So now, setting that aside, what are the details that you have to pay attention to?
Well, it's a Chevy motor, so obviously the block goes Chevy orange.
Yeah.
Because it's an LS7, it's got the aluminum heads, they stay natural.
Right.
Because it's a motion car, it's got a scatter shield here, which is a Lakewood scatter shield. That's the original colors for the scatter shield.
Yeah, you know, motion may be a lot of things, but they don't match the colors awfully well. they kind of clash a little bit. But if you're going to go to war at the track, you might as well be in a clash, right?
That's it.
It's kind of a neat gearbox, too.
Trainee's all ready to go. It's been totally gone through. It's all detailed out. The intake is ready to bolt on. Again, we've got the right hardware from National Parts. They've supplied us with the correct intake bolts.
Correct intake bolts?
Correct intake bolts.
So they have the correct markings on the top and so on and so forth?
That's it.
This is a great science. Now, this doesn't look too scientific here.
Well, this is actually a mark along the assembly line. This is the trainee brace, and again, when we took this thing off, cleaned it off, you know, we found those markings, so we've duplicated them again.
All right. Now, these valve covers, frankly, Peter, they're not up to your usual standard.
Well, no, we haven't touched these yet. This is a before. These are the original valve covers, though. The Motion cars had the aluminum covers that were polished with the fins in it, so we have to buff these up, make them look like brand new.
So does that mean somebody has to stand there at a buffing wheel and just go through this?
It's a dirty job, too.
Yeah, and I bet you don't do it yourself, do you?
No.
Well, you got another project going on, too. I understand you're going to go Trans Am racing.
Yeah, we are. And, you know, if these things make some big horsepower, but if you want to see really big horsepower, I think you should be down at Active to have a look at that.
Well, I'll drop in on Mike on the way back to the studio. How's that?
Great.
All right. Well, hi there. Welcome back to Dream Car Garage. We're here at Peter Klutt's legendary Motorcar, working on brakes on the Baldwin Motion Camaro. Now, whenever we talk about brakes, we always go to Paul Fix from Classic Tube. Paul, thanks for coming up.
Thanks, Tom.
All right, Concours brakes, a whole different kettle of fish from the racing brakes that you and I are used to. They got to work, sure, but they got to look perfect.
That's right.
Now, how in the world do you start a project like this for a guy like Peter Klutt, who you know is going to ride you every step of the way?
Everything's got to be perfect. That's
how'd you
very
find
true.
out how it was delivered from the factory?
Well, investigative work, detective work is the key to doing any concourse restoration, especially when there's a lot of unknowns. There's no
for
real
example,
books.
this plating here, now could have gone this way, could have been black. I've seen both.
Well, we knew that this one was cadmium plated because we took off the master cylinder, and underneath we found that it was gold cad.
Okay.
So investigative work. It could have been black, but obviously the telltale signs. We know this to be the original one with the original numbers, and same with the master cylinder. Everything has to be date coded correct.
All right, now even the master cylinder has this flashing, which if you wanted to be perfect about it, well, you'd have ground that off, but this is still in place. Did you have to rebuild the vacuum booster and the master cylinder?
Yeah, the booster needed to be rebuilt. That's obviously old. The master cylinder we sleeved and put all new internals in it. This is the correct original master cylinder for this car with the correct date coding and everything on it.
All right, now we have a metering valve in here that this has got me confused because I know I've seen these before, but not always associated with the front brakes.
General Motors did the front brake metering from 1967 through 1970. In 1971, they decided to start metering the rear brakes. So you'll see a big one-piece combination valve in a 71 car.
Yeah, well, an engineering decision, and we always love you engineers. You always make the right decisions. One thing that I liked about this setup is that this whole distribution block is up high where the mechanic can reach it as opposed to attached to a frame rail where the car had to be up on a hoist, and there's all sorts of different ones. So this one has all of these various color-coded pieces. Why these?
Well, during the manufacturing or the assembly at the plant, it was very easy for the assemblers to look for a color coding versus checking which thread size. So very quick assembly.
Easier to build, and your concourse judge is going to know what color goes where.
Exactly.
So you better make darn sure that you got that right. All right, now all of this tube here with the, I believe this is period correct.
Correct.
Now, surely you don't start every one of these concourse restorations from scratch.
No, some we do, but obviously Camaro is something that we have the General Motors blueprints for. Oh, so we know that these are
How'd you get a hold of
correct.
those? How'd you get a hold of the General Motors blueprints?
Well, we manufacture tubing for General Motors on a production basis.
Oh, so it's a reciprocal arrangement.
Absolutely.
All right, I was looking for some deep cover stuff there. Okay, carry on. So now you have the blueprints. So basically, if it's made for a Camaro, it's right.
Right. We have everything that's correct for Camaro, all the different configurations. We've sent these to the Camaro clubs, and they've given us the approval for concourse so that anytime you buy one of our products, which you could buy through National Parts Depot, for instance, you know that it's our product and you know it's perfect.
So it'll allow the judge to skip one step. All right, let's go to the rear brakes then before we come back up here to these vented discs. Rear drum brake system, anything special about those?
Nothing really special there. If you're doing a concourse, obviously date coding is the key to everything. And then obviously finish off with a good set of steel tubes back there and the proper rubber flex hose.
All right, I've got some issues with brakes, rear brakes and drum brakes, but we'll get to those in a minute.
Okay.
This is a pretty heavy-duty brake system up here, vented rotor.
Right, a
Big
good
old
option.
GM type caliper. Now, all of this stuff, how do you know it's original?
Well, these were the original calipers. They're date coded for the time and period that this car was built.
Okay,
And
so-
they are Delco units. They are not an offshore replacement part like you'd find at a local parts store.
So you had them CAD plated at the same time you did everything
Exactly.
else. All right, now what else has to go into this? Basically your rebuild kit and so on.
Yeah, this was a rebuild kit with a stainless steel piston and cadmium plated, so it should be good for quite a long time.
All right, so it's a good functional brake. Flex lines, everything true to GM spec.
Right, everything is true. As you can see, a regular replacement might not have this little collar on here, but being an exact concourse piece, it is perfect.
And that's to go through the inner fender on here and so on and so forth. Well, it ain't racing, but it's just as interesting and probably just as detail-oriented, huh?
Yep, for sure.
Welcome back to Dream Car Garage. Starting off as usual with Peter Klutt at Legendary Motorcar. You've been busy.
Well, Jimmy's been busy, actually, and a couple other people, too.
So what have you been up to since the last time we
Well,
saw you?
actually, the car had to go first to Gary at Diamond Trim, and he put in the whole interior on this thing.
Nice job.
He did a beautiful job with the interior. The headliner, finished it off, you know, the carpets. He had to actually use, you know, a couple of the original pieces and brought them up. They look great. They look
All
like
right.
brand new.
So then you went off to Hot Rod Scott's for a new exhaust system?
Directly there to Hot Rod Scott's. John wanted a 3-inch stainless system. And I mean, did a trick job over the axles, comes out in those stock locations. Other than the size of the pipe, looks stock.
Yeah, the size of the pipe is how you measure a real hot rod these days.
That's right.
Especially, that's why you see all the Honda Civics with a juice can in the back of them. I also noticed that you've got the glass in the car. How did you manage that?
Well, actually, we didn't put it in last night. We called Scott from Standard, and he came down and put it in for us. We've had like a bunch of guys working on this thing.
Well, I'm going to be dropping by him later, so I'll make sure to thank him for you.
He's probably a little tired.
And then there's all this kind of stuff. Now, a lot of this stuff looks brand new. Where'd it come from?
All the parts came from National Parts Depot, and actually the reproduction stuff is just great. I mean, it fits nice. It looks identical. You know, we've got a couple of pieces here for comparison. You know, if you look at the SF's emblems, you can see the old and the new, they're identical.
They really are.
Yeah, they're perfect.
And you can see that that's new. And when you compare them, the first time we saw these look pretty good.
Yep.
And when you compare
Put a
them,
new
you
one
see,
on. Yeah, it looks
all
brand
the
new.
difference.
Even little stuff like the radio knobs. I mean, again, they're an identical piece, right? But you can see the difference. There's you know, just some wear on these ones here. Not that it's been used a whole bunch, but you can see that the weather's gotten to it over the years.
Now, if you were going to try to clean a piece like this up, how would you go about that?
Well, you got to be real careful. These are all plastic plated, so you can't really use anything real aggressive, or it's just going to peel it right off. So if you have the chance, I mean, you may as well buy a new piece.
Well, there's a cost factor too. I mean,
Sure.
it's not very much money to buy one of these things.
these are really a couple of dollars. You know.
Well, now here's a piece here that.
Now that piece we're going to have to restore. I don't think we can get that one.
Yeah, I know. It really is a period piece, but now how you go about restoring this is with, again.
It'll get plated again, and then we'll just paint out the black on it and put it back in the stock location.
Okay,
But-
and that was on the side, on the fender.
right on the fenders.
All right, so you've got a whole lot of other stuff here. This is a.
That's the original bezel. Again, I mean, we could send it out, get it plated. Time's a bit of a factor. I mean, platers are backed up 3-4 months right now, and the piece from National Parts is a perfect duplication.
And again, a couple of dollars. It's amazing that you can get all of this stuff through
Right.
National Parts. and-
These again are the old pieces, and they looked great before we put it beside the new pieces. And the new pieces, which are already on the car, I mean, they're perfect.
All right, now there's a new steering wheel. Evidently, this something that you wanted to have replaced. Hard to believe that a steering wheel with such a low mileage car takes wear, but 30 years is a long time.
Yep, 30 years, and he was probably hanging on real tight every time he was making that quarter-mile pass.
A little skinnier on one side. So this is a very nice piece and exactly the same as the
Again,
one.
exact same duplicate, so may as well run with that piece, and it just freshens up the interior.
Well, I see you got a wiring harness that you've taken out of the car. Now, I've seen a heck of a lot worse than this.
Right, this one isn't really that bad. I mean, it is a 1,600-mile car, but obviously somebody's been in here with some side cutters,
Oh, I see.
adding, subtracting, who knows what from the thing. And then it's a little bit dirty. I mean, somebody's been in there with greasy hands, and this cloth covering here is starting to turn black instead of white. So National Parts has a great reproduction harness. It's already in the car, and it's perfect. So why not use it?
You know, you did a restoration not too many years ago in which this harness wasn't available, and it turns out that all of this stuff is available in the proper colors.
Right, but it's a lot more work to try and replicate all the end fittings and put the cloth covering on it. You know, you could spend a day, 2 days doing that when you can pick up the phone, order it, and it fits and it works. And you know it's going to work.
You got deep pockets here today. We're buying everything new, but I see that you've sent out the bumper for replating. Is that
Well,
true?
actually, no. We ordered that again from National Parts. It's a really good piece. You know, some of the plating from the factory wasn't perfect. Again, we're trying to replicate that. We could go and get triple plating done on a bumper. It's probably a little bit nicer than this. It's way nicer than it was brand new. So this is more an original style piece.
Wow, so all of this stuff, brand new stuff. Now what about this grill piece here?
Grill, again, I mean, it is a factory GM grill that National Parts got for us. Now, one of the tricks with these grills is that they don't come painted. You got to paint them body color, the external. So you tape off all the moldings here, and then paint it all body color, and it's ready to go on too.
Now what about these plastic bits in here? Do these need to be restored, or will they
Nope,
just clean up?
those are brand new again.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the whole grill is brand new.
Again, you've got deep pockets, even right down to the original bits for the windshield wipers.
Right, and again, the original ones, they were there, but the rubbers were falling off of it. You had to buy some new pieces.
All right, so putting all of this together in terms of getting it concours ready is going to take some time, as well as having the right pieces. Anything that you need to know about actual technique of, say, putting on these badges? They've always been a problem for me.
Well, these are fairly straightforward. They're drilled holes, and they've got a nut on the back of it.
Oh, I see. I thought you'd use an adhesive.
Yeah, no, and these just go in. I mean, some of the pieces you get today sometimes have adhesives on it, but these are proper reproduction. They're a good piece.
All right. Now, there's some stuff that has been a labor of love. The last time we saw these valve covers, for example, they looked pretty bad, but they really, really came up nice.
Yeah, they're like brand new. We spent a few hours buffing the things. We sandblasted the center of the covers just the way they would have been, or actually glass beaded them, and then went over it with the polishing wheel, and they came up like brand new.
And the firewall with all the detailing on it. This thing is basically ready to start once you put on the other...
Right, we need to put the carb on, you know, the fan, the radiator. There's a couple odds and ends. We got some trim pieces left to put on. Jimmy's going to work night and day. We might not have it striped for the drag strip, but we're going down the drag strip.
Well, that's about in a week's time. Now, what about engine brake and all that kind of stuff? Are you worried about taking a brand new engine to the track?
Not really. I mean, if they've been running on the dyno, you know, I mean, Mike at Active has been building our motors for years. We run them in on the dyno, we do a whole bunch of pulls on them, and then we go out racing. And this thing's no different.
All right, well, we'll save talk about lubrication for when we get to the racetrack and tires and whatnot. So trimming out your vehicle, there's a whole lot of things that are available that are brand new, so you needn't restore them, and it really comes down to a money thing. Right. Why spend a fortune having things replated when you can just pick them up brand new? And apparently a lot of them
They're actually cheaper too.
And they come overnight.
Yep.
It's a restorer's dream when you get stuff in a package that comes in a
lot easier than some of the cars we do.
Yeah, shrink wrap and so on. Hi there, welcome back to Dream Car Garage. Now we find ourselves at Cayuga Dragway Park. Now this is an international drag facility that's not too far away from our studio. It is our Pro Shop segment. That means that Peter Klutt from Legendary Motorcar is here. Congratulations, you got her done.
Well, in a manner of speaking. Not quite. We still have the striping to put on. We got to do the blackout treatment. We got the emblems to put on, but we got it running. We did a nut and bolt on it.
Hey, every hot rodder wants to get it ready for spring, right? And you've done that. Now, this is kind of audacious of you. You're going to take a brand new restoration and a very valuable car, and then you're going to rip it down the drag strip a couple of times. You have had a couple of dyno pulls. What else have you checked on the car to make sure you're going to
We just did a nut and bolt, just like we would with any race car. Go over it, nut and bolt, make sure all the fluids are up, you know, let it get warmed up, do a valve lash on it. It's ready to go.
Well, normally in our Director's Choice segment, we get to the point where I have to ask you about how much. Now, this isn't your car, but if I had to write you a check today for it, what kind of money would I be writing it for?
I think this car, because of what it is, it's the only one out there. It's the right year, it's the right color, it's got the right pedigree. It's going to bring 150 to 200,000, depending who's buying.
150,000. Well, it's out of my league. Now, you're going to go race this car. We know you as a road racer of some aplomb around here.
It's been 15 years since I've been at a drag strip.
So you still know what you're doing?
We'll give it a whirl.
Well, he's going to drive the country-style Trans Am Jaguar, but for now, we're going to go back 15 years. I'm going to hang around, watch you do a couple of passes. I understand you got a buddy here to run with?
Yeah, we brought some competition, an LS6 Chevelle.
All right. Well,
and then we'll run back to the shop, we'll get the stripes on, and we'll meet you there.
You do your worst. I'll hang around, see how we do. So Are you having any fun yet?
Absolutely.
Now, what are you going to do with all this authentic racing rubber for his first pass?
We'll probably clean it off.
Like Donald Fishing. Do you think John's going to see this? Anyway, what kind of numbers do you get?
We're in a 1390 at 103 miles an hour.
That's not so bad, eh?
Not bad. I mean, we weren't shifting the thing at big RPM. We're taking a little bit easy for him. And it definitely
that
lights
little.
up the tires every gear. So.
Well, you know, it's a great car, but hey, you can't account for the driver. It has been 15 years.
That's it.